Welcome to Noir City, the 24th year edition. Thank you for coming. I'm Alan K. Rohde, the co-host and co-programmer. We have two great films, both ending with the word city, both set in New York. And what I'm really excited about, as time has gone on in this festival, it's obviously more challenging to have guests and who have a direct association with some of our movies. But tonight we have two people that are very special, and I'd like to bring them to the stage so we can introduce the film together. First off is a dear friend. I could call her a sister by a different mother, but she is a singer, talented, and the daughter of Victor Mature, the star of our film. Please welcome Victoria Mature. And we have one of the featured players in tonight's movie, a person who has been, as we were sitting there talking, he has been directed by tonight's director, Robert Ziadmak. He's been directed by Elia Kazan, and he's been directed by Fritz Lang. So how do you like those apples? Please welcome the one and only Tommy Cook. Tommy, it's been 75 years. All the movies we're showing in this festival through the 14th, they're all from 1948, including your movie tonight. Just to start out with, how did you get the part, and what were some of your recollections of working with Richard Conte, Victor Mature, and the great Robert Ziadmak?
Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here with all of you. This is one of my favorite films, going all the way back 75 years, 1948. I guess I didn't really audition for the role in Cry of the City, so I guess my agent had it set up. But more important, it was wonderful to work with Victor Mature and Richard Conte, Shelley Winters and Deborah Paget, and have some good memories. Deborah was 17 years old, and she tested for the role, and terrific test, and that's how she got the role in the film. But I had a lot of fun with Victor Mature. You know, if I may say so, Victor.
You may.
Victor loved women, and they loved him. So one day shooting the film.
We do need to keep this relatively PG now, Tommy.
All right, it's okay. One day shooting, they were ready for Victor to come on and shoot the scene, and he was in his dressing room. So I was close to Victor during shooting, and I heard about this. So I went over to his dressing room to tell him that they were ready for him to shoot. And when I got to the dressing room was sort of going up. I didn't know what. I knocked on the door and I said, "Mr. Mature?" And he finally opened the door and I said, "I think they're waiting for you." He says, "Oh, thank you, Tommy, thank you." But
Victoria,
you were quite a ladies' man as well, didn't you? Maybe take out Deborah Paget.
Yes.
Deborah Paget. I had a crush on her during the filming, and I decided I got up enough nerve and to invite her out, and she accepted. So we didn't live too far from each other in the Miracle Mile area of Los Angeles, and so I went to her apartment. I knock on the door. The door opens, and this big, huge woman answers. I said, Hello, you must be Miss Paget's mother? Yes, I am. I said, well, I'm Tommy Cook. You know, I was in the film with your daughter, and I talked to her, and we were going to go out and have something to eat. And she says, oh, yes. Says, wait a minute. Oh, I'm waiting outside, and all of a sudden, after a bit, Deborah comes out. I said, oh, hi, Deborah. Oh, you look so good. We're going to have a wonderful evening together. Are you ready? Let's go. She says, oh, yeah. Okay, here we go. And the mother follows. No way was she going to let Deborah be with me, you know, by ourselves. And she followed us, and she was with us on our date.
It almost sounds like you went to Hope Emerson's dressing room. Got her.
With Richard Conte, we were good buddies. We were both members of the Beverly Hills Tennis Club, and we used to play a lot of tennis together, so it was fun to be able to work with him on this film. But I must tell you, in all the films that I've been in over the years and some 3,000 radio shows with Orson Welles and Norman Corwin and Arch Obler, etc., I want you to know that this is one of the fine movies that I had the experience with. I know you're going to enjoy it.
Victoria, your dad, you could take your dad's career and kind of divide it into the film noir icon, then the guy that was the hoofer in musicals and so forth, and then later on his biggest fame, as he said, making with the holy look.
And sword and sandal.
Sword and sandal. But I always got the impression your dad, he didn't take himself seriously, but he took his acting very seriously. Is that pretty much how he approached things?
Yes. I think he was very proud of his work in Cry of the City. In his noir films, he was really proud of Cry of the City, Kiss of Death. Also, My Darling Clementine was...
He was great in that.
I mean,
Doc Holliday.
When he came to... Oh, and I Wake Up Screaming, of course, in 1941. But he came to Los Angeles, and one of the first things he did was become a student at the Pasadena Playhouse, and then he was quickly invited to be part of their repertory company, and he did a lot of plays there, everything from Shakespeare to Bernard Shaw to Ben Hecht. It was in a Ben Hecht play that he gets discovered by Hal Roach Studios. He makes 4 films with Hal Roach Studios. Then he goes to
1
Broadway.
Million Years BC, most notably.
Yes. So he at Hal Roach Studios, he starts off with a small part, and then they get so much fan mail that Hal Roach decides, no, we have to put him in a leading role. And of course, it's Tumac, the caveman, in 1 million BC, and he's speaking in a made-up language with Carol Landis. And then he goes on and he does 2 more roles where he's mostly clothed. And after that, he realizes that despite all the work he did at the Pasadena Playhouse, all he was going to be known for was grunting and groaning as Tumac. So he realized he needed to go to New York, he needed to go to Broadway, he needed to get into a play, get good notices, get noticed, and hopefully, get a major contract, get better parts. And so as soon as he gets there, and he's supposed to be in an Irving Shaw play, but that doesn't work out. Instead, he's in this blockbuster a musical play, Lady in the Dark, music by Kurt Weill. This is Ira Gershwin's first project after George passes away, and it's with the dialogue by Moss Hart. So it was awesome, starring Gertrude Lawrence and MacDonald Carey. And after that, he comes back to Hollywood, and he is cast in a Josef von Sternberg film, The Shanghai Gesture, and with Gene Tierney. And oh gosh, and he wanders around just looking beautiful and languid in these long robes and this fez hat, quoting the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And then while that's going on, he's also filming I Wake Up Screaming. And it's during the filming of I Wake Up Screaming, which of course stars Betty Grable and Laird Krieger, my favorite villain, or one of them. And while he's filming that, he gets that contract at 20th Century Fox. And so all this happens in 1941. He's on Broadway. He's with von Sternberg. He's in I Wake Up Screaming. He gets the contract, and then December of 1941, we've got Pearl Harbor, and the United States officially enters World War II, which changes the trajectory of everything, including his career. And he serves his 3 years in the Coast Guard. He does a part of his tour up in the North Atlantic on the Storis, and he's the MC for the TARS and SPARS War Recruitment and Bond tour. And then he does a final tour on the Admiral H.T. Mayo, which is a transport ship that takes him to both fronts. At the end of World War II, I mean, he's had a lot of good successes. He's had, the Shanghai Jester and the I Wake Up Screaming, and then he does 4 musicals before he actually enters World War II himself. And those are wonderful. You've got Betty Grable in Footlight Serenade, which is awesome, and you've got Rita Hayworth, who he was engaged to, and he was in My Gal Sal with her, and he does one with Lucille Ball, and they're all fun. They're light. They're escapist fare for people wanting to get away from the war. But he hasn't really found his place yet. No one really knows what to do with him yet. And it's because he's at 20th Century Fox, and after the war, Daryl Zanuck actually champions him to John Ford and says, you really have to try. You have to let him try this part. And so he ends up starring as Doc Holliday in My Darling Clementine and gets wonderful notices in that. And then that leads to Kiss of Death and Cry of the City. And I know that my dad started, I said it, at Pasadena Playhouse in the mid-30s, and I think you were there at the same time,
Yes, he
weren't
was.
you?
I did 7 plays at the Pasadena Playhouse. Yes.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
Were you there
Right.
when you were like 8 or 9? Or,
Yes.
Yeah? Is it true you did one maybe with George Reeves?
Yes,
Yeah?
yes, I worked with George Reeves, yes. We did a play together at Gilmore Brown's Playbox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things I thought about this film is that it's set in New York, but I think they only filmed in New York, like with a second crew and a few of the actors for 3 days. Like the prolonged scene, there's a prolonged scene in the hospital that's very dramatic and intense, and that was filmed at the LA County Hospital and filmed on static sets. I mean, Tommy, you didn't go to New York at all. This was all done right here on the Fox lot, right?
Today, films go on locations all over the world. In the good old days, back in the 40s, you didn't go on location. You did your scenes in the giant film studios. We shot most of, just about all of Cry of the City at the 20th Century Fox studios in Century City.
Yeah, I think there's, they shot a little second unit on 6th and Hester and Mott Street in Little Italy, and then there's a scene with the subway station with Hope Emerson and Richard Connie, and that's pretty much about it. But the feel of the movie, you really feel like you're in New York the entire time in this movie. And I must ask you, Robert Ziadmak is probably the most consequential director of film noir in America during the 1940s, and all of the great films that he made, The Killers and Crisscross and The Spiral Staircase and The Suspect and Phantom Lady and so forth. What was the Robert Ziadmak experience like? What was he like as a director?
One of the finest directors that I've ever had the privilege of working with. I do remember you always knew Ziadmak was around you because he always used this cologne that
Amazing what you remember.
that you could smell for miles away. But he was a true director, and it was a privilege to work with him.
Now, Victoria, your dad, one of the things that people don't know is that his lifelong friend was another actor not associated with noir, Jim Backus.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, talk about, did they grow up together in Kentucky? Where did they meet up at?
My dad and Jim Backus met at the Kentucky Military Institute, but where they really met was they walked the cinder track together. They met in detention. That's where they met and spent many hours talking about kind of what they wanted to do with their life, and it didn't involve the Kentucky Military Institute. And that's where they met. And he used to call the house from time to time, and he would do his Mr. Magoo voice for me, and he was a real sweet guy.
Yeah, wasn't there a story about when he and Bacchus were making Androcles and the Lion, about going into Lucy's restaurant dressed in costume, and they went in there and they were wearing bent plumes and ostrich feathers and armor, and the maitre d' said, well, we can't seat you guys in wardrobe like this, and your dad reportedly said, what's the matter, you're discriminating against members of the armed forces?
What's the matter, you don't serve servicemen?
Yeah, you don't serve servicemen. Yeah. But I mean, your dad really had a sense of humor, did he not, about the movie star stuff? He took acting seriously, but he didn't take all the rest of the stuff very seriously.
And that famous line, I'm no actor and I've got 64 pictures to prove it. It's funny every time. And when you actually see him in the movies that he was proud of, My Darling Clementine, Cry of the City, Kiss of Death, he loved his performance in The Robe as well. He enjoyed it. The other one I love is After the Fox with Peter Sellers.
That's
where
great.
he's directed by Vittorio De Sica.
He basically is doing a spoof on himself in that movie.
And they even show part of Easy Living in that, which came out in '49 with Lucille Ball. So they actually have a moment where he's watching himself on the screen within, it goes on and on and on. It's very meta.
Yeah.
So,
And Cry of the City, for those of you not familiar with the movie, is based on a novel by Helseth, The Chair for Martin Rome. And Richard Murphy really did a great job with the script, because you've got two Italian fellows who grew up together, and one becomes a gangster and the other becomes a cop. And in the book, there were no Italians whatsoever. I think the policeman was named like Saul Einstein or something.
Mendel.
Saul Mendel, yeah. It was completely different.
And that whole story between, that they grew up together.
Right.
And they did that story a little bit in The Killers, because originally in The Killers that wasn't part of that. So that idea of the young men growing up together and each one choosing a different path is interesting.
And Tommy, you got to, although you didn't have scenes with all these people, the character actors in this movie are so good. Fred Clark, you mentioned Shelley, Betty Gard, Roland Winters, and of course the great Hope Emerson, who makes her film debut in this. And Jerry Wald, the producer who was at Warner Brothers, saw her in this. She gives a very interesting massage to Richard Connie. No spoilers, I'll just leave it at that. And he hired her to be the unforgettable matron in the movie Cage, and she was nominated for an Oscar for that. So the casting and everything in it is exquisite. And I'm just so glad to have both of you here that are able to talk about this movie. And Tommy, you were in Panic in the Streets.
Yes.
You were directed by Kazan. A little segue, what was the Elia Kazan experience like?
I used to follow him around to watch him how he would set up a scene, leave the set, and they would call him, and he would come back, gather the actors. He was unusual, but totally brilliant, totally brilliant. I want to say to all of you that I've been in the entertainment industry all my life, and I've been privileged to work with some of the most creative, the most beautiful and loving people in the world. And I'm so happy to be here tonight with you and just enjoy the film. It's a good film.
I can't top that. That's the perfect coda for me, from Tommy Cook, Victoria Mature, and for all of you. Enjoy Cry of the City, and thank you for coming out.